Welcome to Essential Dynamics. I'm your host, Eric Hudson. Welcome to the Essential Dynamics podcast. In the Essential Dynamics podcast, we explore the concepts of essential dynamics, a framework for thinking that I've been developing. And we enjoy having deep conversations with interesting people. In season 3 of the podcast, we're focusing on helping leaders of organizations get unstuck, get clear on their challenges and their opportunities, and help them with their quest. Today, I'm really excited to have a friend, a colleague with me, Chris LaBossiere, who's an Edmonton entrepreneur who's been involved in a number of different ventures and has all kinds of great stories. So, Chris, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Derek. I'm excited to, anytime I get a chance to chat with you about these kind of big, fun, interesting conversations, maybe not always for everybody, but for entrepreneurs or for, owners of operational, companies like ours, it's always fun to, talk to somebody about the kind of big stuff you don't often think about every day in your business. You don't get the chance to think about. So
yeah,
thanks.
And as you know, I like asking questions about those big things, and recognizing that you and I have a consultant-client relationship. I'm not going to ask you to share your secret stuff, but you can share whatever you want with the community about what you're doing, and then we'll have a conversation about that. So Chris, I think the first question that I would just like to ask you is, could you just give us just a bit of a profile of what you're doing now and how you got there with respect to the ventures that you've been involved in?
Sure. I'll probably use we have an investment business that was created after the divestiture of one of our companies in 2020, and so we're involved in a number of operating businesses. But the biggest one in our portfolio, which we have total control of essentially, and I'm the CEO of, is how I'll probably refer to a lot of the things we talk about today, because it's certainly the one that required the most thought, needed the most thinking. Your guidance and and assistance was important in helping along the way. And so that's a company called We Know Training. It was formerly part of a bigger company called Yardstick Testing and Training. We essentially started as a software application that allowed people to deliver exams online, so kind of multiple choice, at its origin exams. This is going back 20 years now when that original software was developed. That evolved in about, since to the point we sold it from about 2015 to 2020. Into the largest testing company in software and test administration, which became like we were involved in delivering exams. We had psychometric consultants on staff, about 10 people, I think, with PhDs that assisted organizations, primarily regulators or level of government, in developing assessments and exams and managing their exam programs. We sold the exam business in 2020 to an American strategic acquirer, and we kept the online training part of that business. There was roughly two halves in terms of size, and what then became We Know Training, which was just a rebrand, which was necessary in that transaction. And we now provide online training, essentially, at its core, on top of our technology, which is designed to essentially, serve, online training audiences, primarily external online trained audiences, and that would be for regulators, government, associations. And those are our customers in this case. So we'll deliver alcohol and server training for the government of BC, and you don't see us there at all. It's just us actually doing all of that, facilitating it on top of our technology, and us building the e-learning content and stuff of that nature. And that's about 25-30% of our business, and the rest would be where we own the brands. That would be everything from health and safety training under a brand we acquired in 2016 called Danatech, which has grown fairly significantly in terms of the number of titles and training programs that we deliver, finance, insurance, real estate, mortgage training, and that kind of professional and financial services realm. We have a company called Business Career College. We do work with cannabis and alcohol training where we own the content. We run the cannabis training program for retail workers in Ontario under a brand called CanCell. Guard Academy, Relo, a new online real estate school we developed. So at its core, it is a training business first and foremost, where we have content that meets a standard, and that's what makes it different than your normal online training for inside your company. This is training that you have to take generally to comply with the regulation or to become licensed or to maintain your license, like continuing education, or to maintain a credential or a certification. So regulated industries, online training, but we have a unique approach in that we have our own technology that's kind of like a Shopify. So when we refer to our training websites, we call them storefronts. And we operate hundreds of storefronts that sell online training on top of our tech. And so it's very much a tech-enabled training business that focuses on regulated industries.
So you said Relo was one of your new ones, and I've seen those billboards up around in Alberta. And so you have a digital storefront, but you advertise in other ways to get people to your digital storefronts. And then one of the things I think that I understand from what you're saying is a lot of times the courses that people take give them access to new professions or advancement in the careers that they have.
Yeah, so you kind of have the big categories would be licensure training. So that's training that's required to get a license. So some professions are regulated by a license. So, obvious ones would be medical professions and real estate. And if you want to sell insurance or financial products, that would be an example of a licensure. Then you have credentialing organizations, which are generally the same principle, but just not as much regulated by the government or a regulator or a college or a royal college. Credentialing organizations could be associations. They can be organizations that exist just to create that designation or credential. And so you'd be familiar with that as a CPA or a certified financial planner. Maybe, in almost virtually every industry, there's, and everything from like, those are professions we might readily know. And then you have things like, industry trade associations around people that install commercial doors. Well, they have programs to ultimately improve the quality of the product or service being delivered at a higher standard. And so generally that's why a lot of associations exist, is to protect the standard of the industry that they're in. So the community doesn't often see this layer of training and education and certification that goes in, and it's around them everywhere. It's everything from restaurant businesses to IT shops. But it's a very, very large market internationally and a very important one, because obviously we're helping people, attain and meet a higher standard when it comes to delivering professional products and services to their industry.
So we all benefit from qualified people on the other end of a transaction or the other end of a jackhammer or anything in between, right?
Yeah, 100%. And obviously health and safety, we deliver hundreds of thousands of safety training programs a year. I mean, the direct benefit, of course, there is that you send people home to their families at the end of the day, if they practice their work safely, and for industry and for just society and community in general, that's why these matter.
It's pretty cool. So a lot of times we hear about acquisitions and mergers where there's some kind of integration that either happens or doesn't happen, and the strategic objectives of the merger might not happen because you can't actually put two organizations together very easily. You've done the opposite. So you had a yardstick and you took it apart and were left with a part. What were some of the things that were interesting about creating an organization that was previously integrated into another organization?
Well, it's the opposite of a merger, as you can imagine, as you explained. It comes with sometimes the opposite effect. Now, you have to take it into consideration and in context of why we had to do it. You have this two-headed beast that's constantly pulling you in two directions, and so we struggled with that for many years. And when you're growing. And Yardstick grew quite rapidly, and kind of an average about 25 to 30% annualized, kind of compounded annualized growth rate. So that growth covers a lot of problems, and you can become a complacent. But every day you still have this struggle of: are we a testing company? Are we focused on exam delivery, testing, and dealing primarily with regulators? Or are we an online training company? And those are very, very different markets. Now we were smart enough to be able to recognize that and make that decision and separate the businesses a little bit before we actually sold it. So we saw this trajectory and we realized, but the effect it has on everything from asset allocation, resource allocation, like capital, and what ideas should you invest in, which new products should you build, or in our case, software features that were required by each of those kind of use cases. They're very different. It was pretty evident, probably 5 years, up to 5 years at least, maybe 10, before we ultimately made the decision to sell one, that neither will be as successful as it could be if you kind of have to share how much attention you give them. And so that was the rationale. After the fact, you do end up with kind of an overhang, I guess, of things like overhead, IT and technology, so platform. Some of these things that were designed to serve two purposes, it actually takes a significant amount of focus and work to clean it all off and only have on if you want to call the business a vehicle. We had to get all the, like, I would use an airport analogy or an airplane analogy. We had to get the ice off the wings. The ice builds up over time, and your effectiveness, your ability to climb or fly, can be affected. And so over time, you got to kind of go back and clean everything up again and get it into a much more focused and ideally, hopefully, much more elegant organizational structure and stuff like that. And then literally the month after we sold the testing business, COVID hit, which was a real blessing to that business, which luckily we were still shareholders of that to some degree. But it affected our training business, and kind of like everyone else that was affected by that, it kind of threw on its head what were the immediate drivers, which were the products that were going to just not sell for a while, which ones kind of exploded, and so we had that valley that we walked through for a while. It was awfully challenging. We had a lot of extra overhead. We had lack of clarity and focus on the company we wanted to be. We still had all these parts of the company we were, and so it really probably took 1.5 to 2 years to get to where we are now. And you've been integral in helping us, kind of certainly gather focus and clarity.
Well, we'll get to that part in a second. I just want to go back to one thing you said, and you said that you when you were operating the two businesses, testing and training, you had to allocate your attention between them, and that was limiting both of them. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast in Essential Dynamics is that management attention is one of the core resources of an organization, and there's only so much, and you really can't make more, right? Like you can add to your executive team, but then it takes supervision if you have a 20-person executive team. So you can't just add capacity. So using and allocating your management attention is very important. So one of the things that you did, just as an example to other listeners, is you cleaned up your business by saying these parts operate together and these parts operate together, and they're splitting our attention. So we're going to focus on one and let someone else focus on another. And I think that's pretty significant. So you have this new business that you're trying to get all the pieces together, and I have opportunity to talk to you about that at some point, and we come up with this concept, which we've talked about on the podcast before, of a business model, or as we like to call it, a value creation system. What was the process like for you to have it in your head and then have it in front of your team? Like, maybe not, we don't need to necessarily jump into how you did it. We can talk about that in a bit, but what was different for you when your team understood the business model compared to when it was all in your head?
Well, it's in virtually every entrepreneur's head, it would be fairly clear what they're trying to accomplish with their idea, I think regardless of that idea. And then, we rely on everything, humans' ability to communicate, time, distraction, and other things. And sometimes that message it doesn't transcend through an organization, even from one layer to the next. So as a CEO, I suppose big part of my role is obviously the vision and communicating it to folks. And I struggled because we have a complex model, so we're a house of brands, if you will. We have, safety training, and the next thing over here we have real estate training, and in each of those industries, at least from an education perspective, those are typically served by individual organizations that only focus on that subject matter expert or subject matter. And that's really, really good for us because that's part of our consolidation strategy. We can find these really smart, great schools that teach certain things that have online training. Either it's a great way to get in, to scale their business, but they don't have the capital to invest in online training infrastructure, or they do, but they don't have the capital or the will to diversify their offering. And so you have these small mom and pops that are generally very good educators. So to me, that whole model has been clear. What was missing was, what's a business model? It's a way to structure and describe what you do. It's a way to report on how you do and how you're performing in terms of management information. And so it was always in my head why we could build this. And this is a really important part of this scalable thing. I didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to be 6 standalone brands that have their own technology, their own financial department, their own even sales and marketing. Like, we really felt strongly that we could have these support operations, as we call them now, that can support, unlimited, or at least be agnostic to what type of training delivery is being delivered. But the customer, they aggregate around the topics. So what I mean by that is the real estate industry, people that want to get a real estate license, generally that is a community. It's regulated by a real estate regulator. There's real estate associations. There's other schools that are typically real estate schools. So we had to learn how to be able to be, to present our value to those industries in a way that they understand. It's a brand that understands. It's in their words, their industry's words and voice. But I wanted to build this scalable business. And there's a few companies in North America that we are trying to emulate. And so it was in my head. I can explain it, but I can't be in every room. When you hire, even just the next level in an organization, so say a director of sales, and they're leading salespeople across all these different verticals, it gets hard they're put in a position immediately to have to, how do you prioritize each of these different things? And so it's basically creating a model where we track, where certain costs are, where, how revenue is recorded, cost of goods, and this value creation model that we basically designed just allowed me to now make it a training product, as opposed to for people to guess what it means and then interpret that when they go and run their department or run that part of the business. So it's kind of like a blueprint for a house that I knew exactly what the house would look like, but I just couldn't get a blueprint spit out of my mouth, and that blueprint has to do everything. Provide guidance on your financial chart of accounts to, hopefully tracking metrics like financial metrics or impact or performance. We have a dual purpose organization, as you're well aware, and one is, it's not just about financial sustainability. It's also about learning impact, like making a true difference in the lives of the people that take our training. So once we got that model figured out, we could figure out everything else, our organizational structure. We could figure out training requirements, obviously management systems that we need to run our business.
I want to grab onto that dual purpose organization for a second and take our listeners back to some very early episodes when we talk about Purpose X and Purpose Y. So you guys have run with that. And tell me about the two purposes again, and just elaborate on those and maybe how that helps you make good decisions in the organization. Sure.
Well, the first one is probably most obvious and most evident. I mean, we are here to build a sustainable company financially that, generates the margins it needs to reinvest in new content, new product areas, and or new, product features like software development or market development through our BD activities. So financial sustainability is the key. Like, obviously, it's the key in virtually any entity, for profit or not. I think it does need to be able to be sustained. So that was the first. That is our, definitely one of our purposes. But when we try to, key back to why we exist and why we're here, then it's not about financial sustainability. It's really about, making a difference in people's lives with the training. And because we're in industries that are primarily regulated or fall under regulation, this training matters. And so I like to use those terms. Now, we focus and help, deliver training that matters. And what we mean by that is obviously protecting the public, the things that, training can make a difference for in terms of how a profession serves their customers or their industry. So that, that second purpose is really about, impact. And I just don't believe you can be financially sustainable if the product that you deliver doesn't meet a bigger purpose or a higher purpose. And in this case, for us, that's making a difference in people's lives. They want to better themselves in their career. We want to avoid a serious incident or fatality in the workplace. The public wants to protect citizens in a real estate transaction or in an alcohol or drug situation where there's inherent risks to community. So it's really, that's our first purpose. And if we do that well, obviously it should drive us towards a more financially sustainable entity.
So those there are trade-offs to that from time to time. Things like pricing or how much effort you put into putting the material together and stuff like that. But they're guided by trying to accomplish both of these things. And is that something that always comes to you, or is up and down the line, people can use the model and the purposes to make, what are good decisions on both sides?
I'd be honest and say that I didn't look at our, impact purpose as often as necessary. And what I've noticed is in the real widespread adoption of us talking about that, and we have some real champions of our organization naturally who are very passionate about that, because that's why people come to work. It's, it's not always, and generally, you can find an income almost anywhere. So the impact and our core purpose of training that matters is a big thing. And I see it now regularly when we're balancing how much to invest versus the quality and the outcome, and always wanting to have, the highest impact possible. And that's why we choose to be in regulated industries. Like, obviously we could be in like soft skills training programs that are unregulated and there'd be no scrutiny on, the competency framework for that training, or the, what does success look like in terms of measurable outcomes. And, but we didn't want to be that. We want to be in a highly scrutinized, highly regulated, I'd call it important sectors, because we're prepared for that. And partly because in our DNA, when we were a testing company, we tested for that. So, in regulated industries, you take your training from, approved or accredited educators, and then you go and you write an exam, and that's generally facilitated by the regulator or by government. And so we're very comfortable in that world, and we believe in it, and we think that the world's going to become more regulated over less regulated as time goes on. And for us, it was a perfect alignment of what our actual impact was. We want to train people well, and we wanted to make an effect or have an effect on their lives, but also serves the needs of the industries we work in. So we swim towards the highest standard. We're pushing constantly in every one of our sectors for more and more standard, and whatever that means. So, like, obviously trying to prevent online training fraud, low quality content, stuff that doesn't have an impact. The click and complete check the box that I got my training, but I don't, or I got my nephew to do my boat license because I really didn't want to take the 4 hours it did to do that. And so we do everything we do to prevent those types of things, which ultimately, could dilute the effectiveness of the training and ultimately upheave what the intent of the regulated industry is.
One of the things we talked about on the show a lot is individuals having a sense of purpose that aligns with their organization, and how much easier it is when people are motivated to sort of adjust and coordinate and line things up rather than to try and get people to do stuff they're not inclined to do. So it sounds like you have a lot of people in your organization who really identify with that make the world better purpose, that impact purpose that you have.
Yeah, and specifically the business model and the systems we've been able to develop since that model's been identified, we always look at both those things. So we can measure financial impact, and we can measure learner impact, literally with real data that we can track on a day-to-day basis in real time. Aggregate that. We could have a kind of red, yellow, green light in our organization for both those things, and we just want to keep the green light at all times. Like we're trying to be, not have financial unsustainability because we've got the world's best training that nobody can afford to buy, or vice versa, of course. It's one thing to be financially profitable, but if you're selling crap, that's not sustainable. So we have really engineered. Now it's a long process, and it's we're no far along as I'd hope to be, but we're certainly engineering all of these abilities for us to now measure if our model's successful or not in real time. And that was ultimately what I really wanted more than anything.
So Chris, we're just about time, but I want to run over a couple of minutes because there's one other thing I want to put together, close off, and that is that you used the word scalable, and you said if we have our systems in place, if we have that model defined, then we're more scalable. And so that's, I guess, the other way to improve your impact is just to do more in more places. And so you've built a machine that allows you to do that. Is that right?
Yeah. So, and again, I didn't have the words for it, but I think you and I, when we were going through this and you were guiding me and I guess putting my thoughts to paper in the constraint analysis that you did. So I wasn't familiar with that as a management technique, but when it became so evident that our constraint was not our technology. So technology enables almost infinite amount of scaling in terms of servers, and we're selling ones and zeros over the internet. So that was not a constraint, and our constraint was really about our business development, our ability to go to market, and either having to invest in our own content or partner or acquire. In our case, we've done some tuck-in acquisition. And when it became evident that was our constraint, the whole organization can start to realize, well, that should be where we focus the vast majority of our efforts, perfect what are, those things that allow us to scale. So our platform and our technology and our management systems, but invest heavily in where we do have a constraint, which would just be capacity and business development, sales, marketing. And that's definitely starting to pay off. And that just having that understanding allowed our whole organization to know what to focus on and what not to focus on.
Chris, this has been fantastic. There's so much more we could talk about, but we're out of time. And I think you made the case for that kind of thoughtful examination of your business model and putting it together in a way that makes sense for your organization, and it's unique every place. So I'm really excited with what you're doing, and would like to have a conversation again. But I think we're going to move to another topic next time. So we'll see what we come up with.
Great.
So Chris, thanks very much. Bryn, thanks to Bryn Griffiths for making this recording possible. And I would just like to say to everyone, check us out at getunconstrained.com. And don't forget, consider your quest.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, check our website, www.road55.ca.